Now, a WFSB Plus original, Serial Killer Suspicions.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sundlun, and welcome to our streaming special on the suspicion of a possible serial killer on the loose in New England. We know that social media has been abuzz with stories of the possibility of a serial killer. People Magazine, Rolling Stone, all the big ones been calling local PDs asking for information. But as of right now, police are certainly saying we do not have a serial killer. I am joined by former chief of police and former chief of homicide detectives, Brian Foley, who has spent decades investigating crimes, including serial killers. And we wanted to have you here to have your take. And we'll stop that because, you know, those are the many alarms we have here.
That was to wake me up. Yes, thank you.
So this has been really taking on. We've got thousands of people in Facebook groups saying that there must be a serial killer in New England. What's your take on that and how that's affecting real investigations?
You know, it's a national story. It's showing up on national news outlets and growing and growing and growing. And it's an unfortunate ill of today's social media society that we live in. And there is so much to this. Where to begin? You know, let's kind of start with bodies being found right now.
Yes.
Okay. So
about 8.
You could go to 10 around, you know, different remains and such between New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts. So let's say we have 10 bodies found. In the last month or so, they've really seemed, a month and a half or so, they've seemed to start showing up in the news. Mm-hmm. Well, keep in mind, and I said that for the rest of your life, Kara, keep in mind that you're going to watch the news in the late spring and you're going to see bodies being found. This is a natural condition of our society. Unfortunately, people have overdoses, people commit suicide, people are murdered, people are hidden sometimes after they're murdered. People die in weird situations when they overdose and when they commit suicides, often in the woods. In the springtime, people start utilizing trails, people start walking in the woods, people get back out to nature. So let's say it slows down in November and now people pick up walking outside and on the trails more in the woods in the spring. They bring their dogs find things in the woods. And let's go with some of these victims were found in the water. In the last week of April and the first week of May in the Northeast, again, for the rest of your life, watch the news. Mm-hmm. There will always be bodies that are found in bodies of water in the last week of April and first week of May. That is a chemistry thing. When a body's underwater, let's say someone jumps off a bridge and lands in the water, the body is that the temperature, as the water temperature goes up, their body begins to produce gases as the water temperature goes up, and the bodies float up to the surface.
Okay.
And that's why they are likely to be discovered in the spring.
Okay, so there's some explanations that can make sense. Let me just update our viewers if you're following this. We've had New Haven held a news conference on Friday to address the rumors. Almost unusual that police would be addressing rumors, but it has taken on such a life of its own. Yep. They said that they did an autopsy on Denise Leary and that there's no sign of any criminal activity there. Yep. Groton also released some additional details. This one was especially troubling to anyone, let alone the folks who think that we might have a serial killer, because we had a dismembered body with a torso in a suitcase. And they say, in fact, they have a suspect. This case is not a serial killer, so at least in New Haven and Groton. Yep. But yet that remains another 8 to 10 bodies, I guess.
And here's the thing, of these bodies, and you know, apologies to you and our audience, some of this, my conversation is going to be morbid. But of these deaths, you are going to have an overdose, you are going to have a suicide, you're going to have an accidental death, you're going to have a murder. I believe there'll be a murder in there. Is it tied into all the other ones? No. Now, when a body's found, the cops are on scene, the local detectives are on scene, and they're looking and determining who it is and looking at the scene. Always so important to focus on what the cops are not saying.
Okay.
All right. They're not saying, first of all, we all need to be on the lookout or we all need to be careful. They're not even saying that towards a targeted demographic, women in their, you know, late 50s or something like that. They're not saying these things. So take in mind, if they had to say these things, they certainly would have. But
they would, because there's a natural distrust of authority sometimes among these groups, thinking, oh, they must be hiding something.
They are. Well, they are. Okay, but it's not anything nefarious. When, let's say we find a body that where we believe as cops, we walk up to the scene, we have a body here. We believe it to be suicide. Okay, we're going to vet it out and treat it like it's an unknown death until we know it's suicide, but we believe it's suicide. Let's say that person has a history of suicide attempts, history of mental illness. The cops aren't going to say that publicly. You have a grieving family that just lost a loved one or lost a loved one, been missing for a long time, finally found it, and now we have a body. Are the cops going to say, that we believe this to be suicide? No. Only the medical examiner is going to say that, and typically you do not hear that when, later on in advance or well beyond the investigation. Let's say the person had drug addiction issues, mental illness issues, heavy drug addiction issues, previous overdoses. Cops are not going to say that. They're not going to say, hey, we found a body, we believe it to be this person. Boy, they had a history of overdoses, and this is most like, no, that's not what's going to happen. They're not going to say those things. You don't speak ill of the dead. I've made that mistake in my career in the past, speaking ill of the dead. And it's not something that you should do. Lesson learned once, won't do it again.
So even if police might know some things, if it's going to cast a shadow on this person and their family, especially in this time of grief, I understand you're saying that's not going to happen. So they're going to know things that maybe we're not going to know because it's a private family matter or something. But given all of the attention and all the different bodies that are out there right now, does that mean a serial killer in your mind is off the table?
Yes, it does at this point. But look, of these 10 bodies, there are going to be a few murders in there. I do believe that. Those murders, if they can determine it's a murder, they will be looked at very closely. Now, only the medical examiner can say this is a homicide, and they'll look: is the skull crushed? When remains are found, you can still find a bullet hole, stab wounds, depending on damage to the bones or the skull, and figure these types of things out. That'll be investigated as a homicide. Most of these cases are, in fact, all of these cases will be overseen by a state police investigation to some degree. A state medical examiner will be the ones who do the initial investigation on the body. When a state medical examiner looks at that, they're recording everything. They are looking at trends. They are looking at commonalities in MO of how people were murdered. You have the state agencies now investigating. They're all talking to each other. You have cold case detectives, missing persons task force, all involved in this. And let's say, Kara, you go missing, and we haven't seen you for 3 months. A detective is going to show up at your house, and they're going to grab your hairbrush, they're going to grab your toothbrush, they're going to grab all this stuff and get your DNA. That DNA goes into a data bank. When bodies are found, DNA is taken and it's compared to that data bank to find out if it's that missing person. There exists the possibility that you could go missing, a person could go missing and not be in that database, and no one might even know they're missing. Transient people who have had difficulties their whole lives, city to city, no one reports them missing. Likely something along these lines could be one of these bodies as well that's found.
So also the New York Post article that I know is getting a lot of traction. So there's a Rhode Island beach town, I know it well, Narragansett, and in these Facebook groups, of which there are thousands of members, people saying, the rumor, and then one guy making a cagey confession almost, that there might be these clandestine graves out in this beach town. And that led to local police going out and searching. And as of what they're telling us, they find nothing. But during the past week, the Narragansett police were made aware of concerning posts circulating online where the author posted anonymously into a Facebook group dedicated to New England serial killers. Police say only the group administrator could see the actual name. It alluded to bodies being buried at Black Point. They went out and they looked. They brought cadaver dogs. They did all this. The police are saying they didn't find anything, yet they felt that they had to. Is there a concern that these rumors are taking resources away?
Yes. Is it a concern? Yeah. And again, it can start to fracture trust between law enforcement. The resources thing, let me say this. We've had to chase rumors before with resources, be it a dive team, be it a search, an extensive search. If you remember Photos Doulos, they were searching all over the place. That really was a drain in resources. Something like this is smaller. So let's go with the Narragansett thing. We got to run some cadaver dogs out there, do a grid search, maybe march some police cadets out there to help with it. That's good training. And when you can overlap good training with an actual event, that is the best training for those involved. So let's say I'm a police officer with a canine cadaver dog, a dog that can sniff out dead bodies. They need the work. and real work in real situations. So this is an opportunity for them to do it. So a drain on resources, sure, but there's benefit to it in training and experience for the officers. So I hate the drain on resources. I like, as a police commander, I like the exercise in training.
Of real life training.
Yep.
Okay. So there's also vigilante investigators showing up. People coming from as far away as Florida, knocking on doors in a neighborhood, reaching out to family, inquiring about possible links to other remains. Have you seen something like that before? And does that raise concern about these amateur investigators going all over the place?
Again, the only problem with the amateur investigators getting involved, Kara, is let's say there is an arrest down the road. Now you have juries that are going to hear, the defense attorney is going to seek these people out and bring them forward and get their theories, only to cast a shadow of doubt on who the actual believed to be suspect is. All right, so let's take the New London case. The guy confessed, to the case there.
We're talking about the man who
is a defense attorney going to start chasing all these other theories around in order to get this guy out?
Right, and that's the case of, and we're talking about in Groton, where we have
tragic
a
case.
torso.
Yep. Dismembered.
In a suitcase,
Yep.
a dismembered body, and they say on the third interview that this man, Koffel, confessed that he did this.
And now
he
you
knew the
have
victim.
these amateur detectives that are come out and start throwing evidence all over the place, potential evidence or theories, and cast doubts, which is a nightmare for a prosecutor and the investigating police officers, and a dream for the defense attorney. So that is problematic.
Okay, so yeah, just to bring people up, that police say that Koffel confessed. He told investigators he killed Wormser inside of their shared apartment and left her body in the Colonel Ledyard Cemetery. That then was discovered 6 weeks ago. We've had interviews with the man who was driving him around, saying he decided to go to police because he was saying some stuff about the woman and got worried about her.
Yep.
So that case, from what you know, appears to make sense that this is really what happened.
It's a one-off.
Yeah.
Single incident homicide, and I believe the vast majority of these deaths will be a one-off death of some sort.
Okay.
Again, overdose, homicide, suicide, or accidental. One of those four things, and in every one of the cases that I've looked at.
So you back to that this is the time of year where we might start discovering bodies because we're walking around, or because a body could be in the water and all this. Yet it all seems to be in the New England area. At least that's what people are tracking versus outside other states. Does that seem strange to you that it's all in this area?
As a homicide detective, no.
No.
No, this is my guess. It's going on everywhere.
We're just
but because
focusing
the
on
way
it here?
social media is, it's now hyper-focused on the area. Again, for the rest of your life, Kara, watch the news in the spring. And I love the water ones. It's perfect every year. At the last week of April, first week of May, bodies are going to come to the surface.
Yeah, and I'm going back to Officer Bruckhart in the New Haven Police Department, who says there's speculation rampant on social media. It seems to be growing, but we have to deal in facts. There are no facts to support that this woman was murdered. I get that there's a sense of wanting to investigate, but this woman had a family. She was loved. The family needs time to grieve. And that goes to what you're saying, that these officers out there don't want to hurt the family, but they also don't want to maybe even give, if they say there's no criminal activity, you're saying to listen to what they're not saying. I don't know in this case how...
There are facts and circumstances in each one of these cases that are known only to the investigative police officer and possibly the family and then the victim themselves. Absent of that, those facts are never going to get out to the public in an easy fashion, absent some sort of FOI request or any sort of long criminal trial where it may go public. There are so many facts and circumstances. You look at the body found in Framingham. The cops are saying, we do not suspect foul play. They're not going to say that willy-nilly. They are just not going to say that.
If they did suspect a serial killer.
If it was suspicious, they'd say suspicious. If they're saying, well, we're investigating it as an untimely death at this point, but we're following up, you can tell when they believe it's a murder. They're not going to say, we don't think there's anything suspicious. So either in that case, there's stuff at the scene, be it a rope, be it natural causes where they were living in the woods, or we don't know. But there's things at the scene the detectives that led them to say, we don't believe this to be
a murder.
Right, exactly.
Or foul play.
Or foul play. However, as a homicide detective, I will tell you, every death you walk into is a murder until it isn't. You approach it like it is a murder so that you don't contaminate evidence. You don't contaminate the scene. You approach it very, very carefully just in case. That body goes to the medical examiner. The medical examiner calls you back a week later and says, hey, we found what looks to be stab wound in the ribs of this decaying corpse. Now, you luckily, if you played it right, you handled it like a homicide investigation, and now you can really start tracking down because you processed a professional forensic scene where that body was found. You can't just walk up and be like, oh, got to be a suicide, that's the end of it. Got natural causes, that's the end of it. No, you can't do that. Everything's a murder until it isn't.
Everything's a murder until it isn't.
Yep.
So as people are out there, and you raise so many good points, let me ask you this. As years of investigating homicides and some serial killers, what does a serial killer look like? What signs would indicate that this is a serial killer? What would you see?
All right, so I would start looking for sex, age, race, demographic type similarities, geographical similarities, but absolutely MO similarities. Is it asphyxiation? Is it stabbing? Is it a shooting? Is there sexual assault involved? You start looking for those types of things that are folding over in similarities in them. When we have a very, very wide database of known serial killers across the United States and how they behave and perform. You'd start looking for some of the signs that have been known now to start tracking them down. Now, that being said, Kara, there's been hundreds of serial killers across the United States. Do you ever remember once the cops coming out and saying, hey, be careful, there's a serial killer out there?
No.
It doesn't necessarily happen right away. But we're in a new day and age. And we've never had something like this when social media did exist. Any of the ones that I worked on, it was pre-social media.
Yeah.
So you didn't have this kind of thing. It's difficult. I'm going to explain a case we had in Hartford with prostitutes. And we had 3 prostitutes, 2 dead and 1 mostly dead, within a pretty short period of time frame. All, again, drug-dependent prostitutes that were, murdered or badly injured, tried to be murdered in Hartford. And on the 3rd one, we started to get concerned that are these prostitutes being targeted? Now, we had nothing to tie them together at this point, but we were concerned for our prostitute population. And do we have to warn the other prostitutes out there that they need to be careful? Now, telling a prostitute to be careful is always good advice. Be careful when you're out there. I mean, that's basic general knowledge that you want your prostitute population. And in Connecticut, it's almost always 99% drug addicted. You want them to be careful, but it's going to fall on deaf ears. But when you have a serial killer, now people start to listen. And we were worried about that was happening. This is, again, going back a dozen years or so. We had found one behind on Park Street, just off of Park Street in Hartford, had her head bashed in with a brick. And this was the 3rd one. And so I had to talk to my boss, and we were concerned that the prostitutes were targeting. I said something in the news on this channel that we found a prostitute killed, and we want the other prostitutes in the area to be careful. Well, I've just identified the dead person, as a prostitute, and her family was not happy about that. Now, there was a history of prostitution arrests, some things that I can't mention in this venue that we knew that this was a prostitution case.
Yeah.
You can't speak
ill of the dead
as a police officer. And I learned that lesson. Channel 3 was out in front with the family, and they were of the police station mad at me for what I had said, when really I'm just trying to warn the other prostitutes in the area. There's better ways to do that. And I learned, and never again would I ever speak. People would ask, when someone got shot, I wouldn't even speak of their criminal history. That was it. You want to look up their criminal history, you have the same access to the databases as I do, go ahead and look it up.
Do all serial killers, from your experience, have a similar target, a type? I'm thinking back to
women seem to be.
Michael Ross had a similar. You can think of the Netflix series Jeffrey Dahmer. They generally have victims that would be linked.
It's who's the most susceptible, and people that are really vulnerable to these types of things. And again, women. Prostitute population, women are going to be overpowered by a serial killer man in most circumstances, and so those are the targets essentially that you kind of look for in each of the cases. And again, police departments are very rare to come out and say that this is the incidence of a serial killer. But at this point, you have so many eyes looking at it, so many retired detectives like myself, but detectives better than me, that are not saying there's anything to indicate these are tied to any sort of serial killer situation at this point.
So to everyone out there who is concerned on social media and these thousands of Facebook groups, thousands of members in Facebook groups and different things going on, there's obviously some who just don't believe this and who are very concerned that there is a serial killer on the loose. So for those who might be watching this on social media and nervous, what do you say?
Well, I'm never going to tell anyone not to be careful out there. If you're a woman out in the woods, exercising, walking trails, or anyone out there, you should be careful and be aware of your surroundings. At the same time, I don't think you need to be looking over your shoulder for a serial killer and running and hiding at the sight of any person out there. Just always be aware. Look at everyone today. There's this romanticism. Everyone wants to be a homicide detective. Everyone wants to be a serial killer detective. They watch CSI. They watch everything that's happening on TV and the movies and social media. We used to get cold calls to the police department of kids in college taking forensic science or wanting to go, and they want to get hired in the police department and be a forensic, detective right away. And it's not how it works. You need years and years of investigating, police regular investigations and rise up and prove that you can investigate to get to that level. But, in this fast media society and watching TV and everything glamorized, I can tell you any homicide, any serial killer, any type of investigation, it's not nearly as glamorous as TV would have it want to be, and yet everyone still wants to be the one out there proving that these things happen, and it can only cloud the investigation of the police department.
Well, we encourage you. We will be posting this, of course, on our Facebook page, and perhaps some of you will share it. So if there are questions, write them down. Maybe you'll go back and answer them. But I want to thank former Chief Brian Foley, who's done decades of homicide investigations, have also investigated serial killers, and at this point, from everything we know from our local police here in Connecticut, and you've looked even beyond at some of these cases,
yep.
The verdict from the actual investigators is we do not have a serial killer here.
Everyone's watching. All the investigative teams in federal, state, and local are all watching and coordinating together. I don't believe that this is anything close to a serial killer situation.
So there you have it. That's everything that we know at this point as we continue to cover those serial killer suspicions. We will have much more coming up on our newscast of any of our local police departments sharing this. But I appreciate your time. And I think a lot of people obviously are very concerned or at least very interested in this story. And so thank you. Thank you, Brian Foley.
Thanks for having me.
Have a great day, everyone.